Alrighty, welcome everybody to our second installment of Real Talk FCD, which is our webinar-based series where we talk to prominent politicians and progressive activists in the state about some of the key issues that we're facing in this state, primarily not just in 2022, but beyond. So today with us, we have State Representative Felicia Robinson from House District 102, who we're extremely excited to have. So before we kind of get into the questions, I just want to pass it to Rep. Robinson to just kind of introduce herself.
Well, good morning. Now, first of all, would like to thank you all for having me on, and thank you for what you do. I believe that this is really, really important to make sure that all age groups and all people are engaged. So you sharing this information is extraordinary, and it's really, really great. I represent House District 102, which covers parts of Pembroke Pines, Miramar, and Miami Gardens. So it's South Broward, North Dade. I'm an educator and I take education very seriously. Outside of health, I think it's the most important thing that we have because it builds foundations no matter what you do in life. So I am happy to be here with you today and just share some information about what's happening here in the legislature and hopefully activate and get you all riled up to get involved, because as you stated, it's not about just the here and now, it's about our future.
Awesome. And it's funny, I actually grew up in Pembroke Pines, so I'm a little familiar, but alrighty. So kind of our first question kind of pertains to a big issue that has been going on, at least as far as I remember, over a decade at this point, and that is in regards to Medicaid in the state of Florida. For those who are unaware, Florida was one of the states that did not expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, and ever since it has been a prominent issue within the Democratic Party to make that case, because there are millions of Floridians that would benefit from a Medicaid expansion. So Rep. Robinson is one of the sponsors, if not the primary sponsor, I believe, in the House of House Joint Resolution 239. Which would expand Medicaid eligibility. And I guess just to kind of talk a little bit about what that would look like and how that would impact the average Floridian. Because I've always felt like when it comes to our messaging as a party, that's the one part that kind of gets lost in translation, is what is the tangible impact to Floridians in the now with the Medicaid expansion?
So as I stated, Rob, in my brief introduction, is healthcare is the most important. And as you stated, there are millions of Floridians that lack health care. So when we talk about this particular resolution, what will it do? It will open doors for so many. I actually earlier got off a call with Florida Voices, which represents disabled people. We have thousands of disabled constituents and residents here in Florida that cannot make it because if they work, then they don't fall into the bracket where they can receive Medicare. And then with the jobs that they're able to get is not enough to actually keep them afloat. We have this continuously going on. It's a big loop. I do not understand why we are leaving all of this money on the table that we could use to actually improve healthcare for all Floridians. I truly believe that all Floridians deserve the freedom, because we say we're the freedom state, to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And that's what I believe that this particular resolution would do. What this resolution would do, to explain it, is that we're no longer saying let's take a vote on it as legislators, because we understand that for whatever reason, it tends to be a party line issue. We're asking in this resolution for us to now just put it on the ballot and let the everyday Floridian decide whether they want Florida to accept the federal dollars to expand Medicaid. Healthcare should not be something that's partisan. Everyone deserves to be healthy and to be able to take care of themselves, because if they don't, then they don't have a great quality of life. So with resolution 239, it simply is saying, okay, let's not keep this in the Capitol, in the House, in between Republicans and Democrats. Let's just agree that we will let the Floridians decide on what they want to do. And I guarantee you, if we were able to put this on the ballot, if we would move this forward, Floridians would agree that we need to accept those federal dollars to expand Medicaid, because everyone has someone in their family that needs additional health care.
No, yeah, I agree 1000% on that. I think that, you know, it's the second that gets on an actual ballot to the average Floridian, I think that's passing overwhelmingly. I think that the opposition to it's been kind of ridiculous over the past decade, particularly when how many other millions of dollars we take from the federal government. Even now, DeSantis is taking credit for infrastructure that they didn't even pass. So why we can't just expand Medicaid is beyond me. But to kind of shift gears a little bit, we kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about your background and how that's had an impact on how you legislate. Like, for those of you who are unaware, State Representative Robinson has a very extensive career in public education in, I believe, the Miami-Dade School District.
Yes.
And which is very impressive, as well as I know Tallahassee can sometimes be like a classroom of school children. But I guess kind of the first question on the public education side is more, how is your experience in public education? I know you did both teaching and kind of administrative as well. How has that prepared you for the role that you have? Because I think it's one of the more unique professions of people in Tallahassee.
I agree. And one of the reasons I feel that it's important is because as a leader, I say one of my jobs is to educate, because people do better when they know better. And so having conversations with you and having conversations with everyday people is really important for me to help them to understand the process. Because when people understand the process and they understand the issues and they understand how they affect them, then you can activate them and get them a little bit motivated to actually advocate for themselves, which is important. Because until we get the everyday person involved in this legislative process in some form, we're not going to get the type of legislation that really is going to make an impact on their everyday lives. So when we talk about me being an educator, that's kind of how I lead. I try to make sure that I push and I support legislation that's going to actually improve and make my everyday constituent path of life a little bit more successful. But I don't just push it on this side. I also try to make sure that I take it back to my constituents so that they'll know what's happening. Every Friday, I'm giving an update on different bills that have either come to me in committee or that they should know about. Bills, some of them I support, and I tell them why I support it. I try to explain it in everyday language so they'll understand how it affects their lives. And then those bills that I know will not give a positive impact on their lives, a bill that I oppose and I think that they should oppose, I try to make sure that they understand what it's going to do and what effects it's going to take so that they can actually make their own decision. I never tell them, you know, what should say, but I tell them that you need to know how this is going to impact you. So that's what the education process has done for me. Through this process, it has allowed me to make sure that I take what I'm doing here, but share it with those that it's going to affect most. When in the legislature, we're constantly have legislation that is affecting education. And as I stated earlier, I think education is the second most important thing. Health comes first, but right after health, it is definitely education. And a lot of the legislation that is going on when it pertains to education is sometimes heart-wrenching, because for years, and it continues to go on, the educator as a profession is not necessarily respected. And when I see legislation that is hurting that industry, which ultimately is going to hurt our children, which is ultimately going to hurt our country or our state because of the effects that it will have in the future. I try to draw light to it, I fight against it, and I speak up against it. And so I actually was on a call yesterday with the PTA Association, and I thank them for being active members, but I shared with them that we need them to continuously be involved in this process because they're closest to the people. And that's what we need with our legislation so that we can make things work. So I do think that being an educator up here is a very unique component. And I encourage more people in this field not to just do it because you're an educator, but so that you can kind of balance it out and that you can actually take that part and bring it back to people, because when people are detached from what's happening here, it's not as effective.
No, yeah, agreed completely. And you kind of touched on it in regards to just some of the legislation and things that we're seeing now. And I think that at least in my lifetime, I haven't really seen as direct of an attack on public education as I have in the past year or so. And there's been many attacks on public education, so that's saying something. But I know in conversations with like Florida high school Democrats, even with other Florida college Democrats who have grown up in Florida public education, that the bills and things that we're seeing, it's disheartening, to put it lightly, if not just outright disturbing. But I guess kind of to do two separate questions. The first one's less bill oriented and more, I kind of want to know what your take on what we've seen this past year in terms of this attack on school boards and this push to particize these races. And I know in a specific case, I want to say it was in Brevard County, a school member saying that their child was threatened, that they called Child Protective Services on their child.
And it wasn't true.
Which was ridiculous over the board member's support for a non-discrimination policy in the county. Like as somebody with a public education background, where do you kind of see like this in many cases manufactured outrage from the conservative machine, but also parents that have been kind of swept into this thing?
So again, like you said, it's an attack on public education. I think it's just another tool to wear the system down. For years, they have tried to, and they are continuously trying to just destroy, and that I hate to say that, but my mind is to destroy public education, period. And so this part with the partisan school board, I think they even talked about not having, taking away their pay, other legislation like HB 7, determining what can be taught, all these different things is just a serious attack on the education system as a whole. What I want to say, or what I want to pull out, is that if you listen to leadership, governor included, we talk about Florida being a freedom state. However, when we look at the legislation, and especially legislation that pertains to education and education system, I have to ask, freedom for who? Because the type of legislation that is being pushed out and that is passing and moving does not give freedom for all Floridians. It tends to only and always focus on a select few. So I always ask, when we talk about or we look at the legislation that's being pushed, the question should always come up, this is freedom for who? Is it freedom for all Floridians? Because as a leader, as an elected official, when we took our oath, we didn't take our oath to just represent a select few of people. Although I represent Pembroke Pines, Miramar, Miami Gardens, when I vote on something, I vote on it for all Floridians, every last person that lives in the state of Florida. And I think that if we would focus more on that and making sure that if we want to truly be recognized as the freedom state, when we create legislation, we make sure that it allows freedoms for all people, then we'll be in a better state.
No, yeah, and our final kind of at least politics question that we had in relation to kind of what we're talking about, and you mentioned the very clear perception that a lot of people have that some of these policies are definitely geared towards certain groups of people and are meant to protect or empower certain groups of people over others. That there's a famous now on the the social media sphere painting by I think a Detroit-based artist named Jonathan Harris, and it's of a mural of civil rights leaders and the image of a white person with a white paint roller rolling over all of them. And that's something more than any of the other bills that we've seen that is just it's so grotesque, but it's happening everywhere. And I kind of want to know your opinion, obviously, on the bill itself that we know they're trying to push, but also just this very concentrated effort to tie just teaching basic history of any group. I mean, one of the bills that we've been talking a lot about within College Democrats is a bill to add Asian American voices into public education. That bill's getting wrapped into this critical race theory nonsense, and you see this now bill, Don't Say Gay bill that's getting wrapped into it as just acknowledging any marginalized group in any form of education as somehow critical race theory. Like, kind of more just your thoughts on not just as an educator, but just in general, like not only where did this come from, but how do we combat this? Because it's one of those things where it's looking more and more likely that if they want to pass it, they can pass it. But how do we make sure that the next generation doesn't, if you're not a straight white person, that you feel like your voice doesn't matter when you go to school every day?
And you said so a lot there that I have so many different ways I want to address it. But what I would say is that it's disgraceful. It's just disgraceful, it's disheartening, and it's hypocritical. We talk about this particular legislation, which encompasses all the things that you just mentioned. But then on the other hand, we have a bill that is moving to teach communism in our school, something that is already a part of our social study curriculum, but now they want it to be highlighted. They want to give it a day, and do all that. So we want to do that on this end. We want to highlight something that's already being taught, along with all other forms of government. But no, we want to signify this one particular one because of whatever special group that we want to, honor or identify with. But then on the other hand, we don't want to share America's history, no matter how good, bad, or ugly it is. It's fact. It's what happened. It's part of what made America, America, or where we are today. We don't want to include other groups. So that's very hypocritical. We're doing one thing on one end because it's a group that we like or we want to support. And then on the other end, we want to disenfranchise or just take away any acknowledgement of others. I have that issue. So definitely don't support it. The other component I have is going back to the teaching profession. So now you're saying that a teacher can go to school, get the degrees, and have put their heart and soul into their profession. But then we're going to come up with legislation to say you don't know enough to determine what should be taught or how it should be taught. As a 28-year educator, I can say without any qualms or any comfort that teachers are very passionate about what they do, and they will not have or say anything or teach anything that is going to destroy or make their students not successful. We share knowledge, and even when it's things that's not good or great, we share it or we present it in a way that they can learn and be knowledgeable and grow from it. But with this type of legislation, it's a slap in the face saying that you all are educators, but we're going to tell you that you can't do this, you can't be trained to do that. There's no other profession that they do that in. So it's a lot of emotion that ties up with this type of legislation. So again, I said it's just another way to break down, destroy the education system, which ultimately is going to have a major effect of destroying us as a people. And that's when I say that, I'm saying all Floridians.
No, yeah, and it's just awful, the things that we're seeing, and knowing the goal is the long-term impact that it's going to have on the future generation of leaders and things like that, especially for students, again, who are not, straight and white, that they're basically being told that they need to live in the shadows, or that their history is not worth acknowledging.
Which has a major mental impact. It's just so many different components. But what I did want to address coming towards the end was that what could you all do? Well, one is what you're doing now. You're talking to people, you're having the conversation, and that's where it begins. But we can't only just talk about it. We have to start strategizing and coming up with effective plans to work against it. The one that I think is most effective is that we have to get people to recognize that they have to vote in every election. They have to vote for every participant, because right now they're able to do these things because they have the numbers. And I would say it's not that all, it's 120 of us in the House. There's only 40 Democrats. And I would say those 80 Republicans, not all of them agree with this legislation, but because there is such a strong hold on them, I guess, wanting to be reelected and how that would affect them, they go along with it. What we need to do as Floridians, as constituents, is ask our representatives, ones that are your home representative, or even if they're not your home representative, why are you supporting this legislation? Is it going to benefit all Floridians? Ask those questions and ask them to give an answer. And if they don't give an answer, that's things that you need to share, because when you take that oath again to represent all, and we need to hold them to that.
No, yeah, and I think that that's the most effective way that you can get movement on some of these things, because we know that there are a lot of representatives that I think see through it, but realize the political reality and are trying to, jump on that ship, even though they know it's wrong. And I think that calling it out is the best way to do it. Our final question, if you have time, Rep. Robinson, is less politics and more, we try to ask the different people that we invite on here, just the most, I think basic question of when you get up every day, like what inspires you to be a state representative for your constituents? Why do you do the job that you do?
I truly do my job for people. As an educator, it's not something that I aspired to do, get into politics, but I've always been an advocate for people. I've always wanted to help. And so someone asked me the other day, well, what you going to do next? I told them I don't know, because before I take a move, one, I pray about it. And I only want to do this as long as I am effective. And what do I mean by effective? Meaning that I think that I am getting something done that's going to positively affect the people in my community, the people that's in my state. And so knowing that I'm up here fighting and I'm giving a voice to them, and I am working on some appropriations, trying to bring back something home to them, then that's what keeps me motivated to keep it going, because I recognize that someone has to do it, and it has to be someone that can actually relate to the everyday person.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rep. Robinson, for being able to come on today and to talk to us. I know you're doing great work up in the state legislature. Every Democrat is doing the best that they can. I know it's a difficult job. I know it's very difficult, especially when it comes to the numbers. But you all are doing the work that needs to be done, because I think you kind of said it, is that if you all weren't there, then who is going to stand up and be the voice for all of our communities? With that, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. If you have any final words, you're free to say. And yeah.
Well, I just thank you all as young people for you all getting involved, because that's where it starts. We have to get involved. So I encourage you all to continue doing what you're doing and bring someone along with you, because together we can make something different. We can make a change. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And